all of the models that we've used in previous models to be able to understand how the world works, they're all flawed because money was always flawed. It could always be there was a throughout history, if you could control the money, you could control society. And so there was such a throughout history, there was such a different kind of power to try to control money, and it repeated over time throughout history. And that means, and the winners write the history books. So all our history must be flawed with that problem embedded in it. And you have what's happened with Bitcoin is it is a complete change in decentralizing and securing money, so you don't need an institution to protect it. And as far as I can tell, it's literally unstoppable. It'll look to you, if you're measuring it from the existing system, that Bitcoin's going up in price. But what's really happening is all prices are falling against it at a crazy level. And if you're in the existing system, you're going to get way more and more confused as money is manipulated at a rate that will blow people's minds to be able to pretend the existing system is solvent.
All of the models you understand for how not only Bitcoin but how the entire world works are completely wrong. That means Plan B stock to flow model, the Bitcoin power law model, and every other Bitcoin model you have seen. That's the latest message out from Jeff Booth. Jeff Booth is a world-renowned author, entrepreneur, and now Bitcoiner. In his latest interview, Jeff broke down why all the Bitcoin models are wrong because they were built on a deeply flawed monetary system. Without further ado, let's jump into the highlights of Jeff Booth's latest interview.
We're in a slow transition to an entirely new system that operates on different rules. That's the highest level. All of the models that we've used in previous models to be able to understand how the world works, they're all flawed because money was always flawed. It could always be there was a throughout history, if you could control the money, you could control society. And so there was such a throughout history, there was such a different kind of power to try to control money, and it repeated over time throughout history. And that means, and the winners write the history books. So all our history must be flawed with that problem embedded in it. And you have what's happened with Bitcoin is it is a complete change in decentralizing and securing money, so you don't need an institution to protect it. And as far as I can tell, it's literally unstoppable. And so all of these models, when you ask a question, COVID or inflation or deflation or all of these things, those are all constructs of the existing system. And I try to solve this at the highest level first, and then walk down through the examples to be able to get people to understand. And there isn't an economist alive or dead who would disagree with what I'm about to say. Prices fall to the marginal cost of production. Period. Over a long enough time horizon, that always happens. And so you can stop it for a short term. You can stop it by regulating an industry in a country, by regulating an industry, or pushing additional units of money to try to stop that from happening in the short term. But over a long enough time horizon, the free market finds a way, and prices continue to fall to the marginal cost of production. So for the same reason the oxygen you're breathing right now is free. No entrepreneurs could, if somebody came up with a business idea that said, hey, I'm going to go and give Brandon oxygen while he's doing this Zoom call, you'd laugh him out of the room and he'd never pay for that because it would be ludicrous. So you can't create a market on something that is like that. And so the entrepreneurs go elsewhere where they can create value for society. And as they do, they attack different problems, and prices fall as a result. Now, if that's happening, which we know it is throughout time, and we also know that productivity is increasing exponentially with artificial intelligence as we get better and better at things, then prices should be falling exponentially and life should be getting cheaper. But the only thing that could measure that happening is a unit of account or a monetary unit without manipulation, hard capped. So what's happening throughout the world, all of this noise and everybody that's measuring Bitcoin through the noise, inflation, deflation, what's actually happening is in Bitcoin, prices will fall forever. It'll match economic law. And because it can't be manipulated, it's outside the system and it has no counterparty risk to the system. You could introduce counterparty risk if you wanted to store it on an exchange. You could introduce counterparty risk if you applied leverage to your Bitcoin and have somebody else hold it. But if you hold it in self-custody, you're literally outside of that system, and economic law is accruing to you through the natural force of what I said, prices fall to the marginal cost of production. And everything else is noise. Everything. Because the existing system has $400 trillion of debt that is already insolvent. There's no way to pay it back. So when you hear somebody say, we're going to pay it back, you just instead say, how? Right? And realize that the only way that they could pay it back is through manipulating money faster and having a higher inflation rate to pay back the debt in units that aren't the same value of those units. So if you want to play in that system and measure the world from that system, then you're going to slowly erode the value of all of your work and everything else as it concentrates up. So it's just two different kind of measurements of the world we live in. One based on facts, on kind of, and I want to qualify that. Assuming there's no break in Bitcoin for forever or for some time, what I just said would be true. So now you could do the work and say, is there any possibility of Bitcoin failing? And that's where the work should go. But everything else that I just said, assuming that Bitcoin isn't broken, then prices will fall forever against it. Why it's so hard to understand is people stay stuck in the system, measuring the system from the system. And you had to introduce what was actually really happening outside the system, and most people could see, okay, wait, I understand that technology reduces prices, but I live in a system where prices go up. Why? And when people would go deep enough on that and ask why 5 times, then they could start to get to the bottom of this problem, that the system can't solve the system problem. Ultimately, there is no way, no matter who you elect, no matter what ends up happening, and it is just, you're putting it's just theater on top of a structural problem. And we're in a phase transition as society from moving to a system that we always knew, and all our history books are full of, that it looks like this, and this is why it looks like this, to a system that we don't know. Now you can project. Now remember what ends up happening in measurement itself is part of the system. It's why in that measurement itself, it's part of the system, is why BlackBerry doesn't see Apple or the iPhone. It's why Blockbuster doesn't see Netflix. It's exactly why creative destruction ends up happening, because the people inside the system measuring all of the things from, if you think about Blockbuster, 9,000 stores, and the 9,000 stores being on all the right spots gave them a crazy advantage in that world, where they couldn't see that once internet speeds hit a certain tipping point and you could download movies in real time, that the 9,000 stores became an anchor around their neck rather than an advantage. They were an advantage till one point in time, and then it just changed. And you couldn't measure that from Blockbuster. You had to intuit what would happen. You had to forecast, or you had to think what would happen if this happened. And so that was what all of society is going through right now. And the people that are more and more time in Bitcoin, are spending more of their time in Bitcoin, is they're actually already living in the future. They're seeing prices fall, and I'd say up and down. It would look up and down, but if they measured everything else in Bitcoin in years, you're seeing prices fall each and every year throughout in most cases. But over a long enough time horizon, you'll see all prices fall against Bitcoin if you're using it as your unit of measure. First, what I would do for everybody listening that is already understanding Bitcoin, you're going to you'll naturally believe you always knew it because you know it now. And you'll fail to realize that only a year ago or 2 years ago or 4 years ago, you were exactly the same as everybody else. You had no idea, and you were acting exactly the same. And that includes, maybe not 4 years ago for me, but that includes me before taking this journey and understanding. So I kind of look at what's ending up happening as a system of incentives, and people reinforcing those incentives in the existing system without really taking the time to be able to understand this. And actually, a lot of times, something that seems so crazy to the existing world, they're pushing further against it. They're moving deeper in a hole with all of the people that they hang around. In fact, I'll use an example. It's a 1.2 billion fund. I'm a founding fellow of something called Creative Destruction Lab, an international organization where essentially we mentor new companies that come in through essentially volunteering. And so I've been in a long time. We see lots of companies come through. I've invested in lots of companies through that process. And there's one of the streams, it's a climate stream. And all of the capital around that climate stream and all of the people wanting to do great for the climate are inside the system, and they can't, and in fact, they would push massively against Bitcoin, and they respect me, but couldn't see what I was doing with Bitcoin because they think it's terrible for the environment. And one of the very, very bright people in that stream, he runs a 1.2 billion fund. I literally had to have this conversation with him off the record. And so we had a 2-hour conversation 2 weeks ago about this, where I just kind of met him where he was and went through this. And you could tell it wasn't what people believe. You could tell he actually was confused, super smart, but he was living in the system. He cares crazy about what's happening, and a really great guy, but he was completely confused how this could resolve that. And he just sent me a note yesterday saying, I'm finally starting to get my head around this. I'm finally started. So he too will move over to the new system. I'm sure of it. He will start investing into the new system. I'm sure of it. And you bring more and more people. But the belief that everybody knows is just a fallacy. They just don't. It's so they're measuring the system from the system, and their incentives outweigh their ability to do deep research and understand. Now, are there some people? Are there some terrible people within that system that do know? Yes, but the majority don't. Today, we have a government and an entire regulation body designed to protect our money, protect our savings from a system designed to steal it. Right? So think through that, right? We have a system underneath this that is designed through inflation to steal your money, which you don't have a vote in. You have no vote. And then there's a whole bunch of regulation to protect you from that system that steals your money. So it's ludicrous.
So there's Jeff Booth's insights into the flaws of existing Bitcoin models and the global monetary system. As he highlighted, our understanding of Bitcoin and the world economy needs a fundamental rethink due to the inherent issues within our current financial systems. Jeff Booth's experience as an author, entrepreneur, and Bitcoiner provides a unique perspective that challenges conventional wisdom and models like Plan B stock to flow and the Bitcoin power law model. His argument suggests that these models fail to account for the deeper flaws in our monetary foundations. For those who want to stay up to date with the latest in the crypto and Bitcoin world, consider subscribing to my daily 5-minute crypto newsletter. It covers the latest expert predictions, breaking news, and top on-chain analysis, all in a nutshell. Click the first link in the description to join over 60,000 others in becoming a better crypto investor right now. Anyway guys, hope you all enjoyed today's video and that provided you with some value. I'll see you all in the next one, and as always, all the best.